Let's catch up with the co-leader of the Green Party, Russel Norman, of course, joining us this morning. Morning, Russel.
Good morning, Wammo. How's it going?
Very well, thanks. And as predicted, the specials have come through for the Greens, and you've managed to pick up an extra MP.
Yeah, that's right. We've got 14 MPs, 11.06% of the vote. So it's a good result for the Greens.
And of course, a very special MP in that Mojo is deaf.
Yeah, that's right. Our 14th MP, Mojo Mathers from Christchurch. Thanks to everyone who voted Green, we now have our first deaf MP in Parliament. And so, that's going to be part of Parliament adjusting to people with disabilities so that it becomes accessible to people with disabilities.
So what are the challenges for Parliament then to make sure that Mojo is across all the issues and is able to complete her job as an MP?
Well, I mean, when you think about Parliament, quite a big chunk of it obviously happens verbally, and so we're going to need to find a way to translate that, whether it's into sign or whether it's into captioning. It's a bit unclear at this stage. So we'll be working with Parliamentary Services and the Speaker and Mojo and some expert advisors from the deaf community to figure out the best way to make sure that Parliament is accessible for people with hearing impairments, which is thousands and thousands of New Zealanders. I mean, it's not just Mojo. The great thing is it will mean that Parliament's accessible for heaps more people.
I mean, does Parliament, I don't know, does Parliament TV actually have captioning at the moment?
No, it doesn't.
It's pretty hard to do in real time, though, isn't it? Or is it? I don't know.
Well, it's. I guess I'm no expert on it myself, to be honest. So we're gonna find out exactly what's possible. But I mean, whatever we do to make it more accessible for Mojo is going to have an impact for everyone with hearing impairments, which is great.
Yeah, very true. Okay, well, there's been some other issues around the place at the moment, and there's been the study has come out about water quality and farming. And there seem to be some positive things in there for farmers, that they have been doing what they can to keep the water quality at least reasonable in some places, but in other places not so good. What is your understanding of the report?
So what's come out is there's this thing called the Clean Streams Accord, which is an agreement between Fonterra and central and regional governments. And it's about fencing off streams and various other actions that dairy farms, it's about dairy farming in Fonterra, various actions they can take to clean up waterways. What's the really interesting thing that happened yesterday was that MAF also released an independent audit of the claims that have been made in the Clean Streams Accord. And the claims in the Clean Streams Accord, they're voluntary reporting, and so they give voluntary reporting of the streams they've fenced off and so forth. And so the Fonterra report said 84% of streams had been fenced off, but the independent audit found it was 42% of streams had been fenced off. So what it means is that there's a huge discrepancy now between what Fonterra has been claiming and the reality that was established by an independent audit, which really does knock Fonterra's credibility on these issues, unfortunately, because they've been making big claims and it turns out they're not true.
I see. Okay. So things really aren't on the improve at all?
Well, not according to the independent audit, as opposed to the Fonterra self-reporting. I mean, it's the whole problem with voluntary measures. With voluntary things, it's the best will in the world. Voluntary just doesn't only get you so far, and so voluntary reporting basically exaggerated the amount of fencing, kind of doubled it. And likewise, voluntary measures to clean up waterways, they can get you so far, but you really do need some rules. And if we don't have rules around intensive agriculture, we're never going to clean up our waterways.
Okay, talking rules, Durban, the climate talks in Durban are now over. An agreement of sorts has been reached. What do you make of the results over there?
Well, I mean, the upside is that there's still, if you like, a UN process and there's kind of a path that we can follow to getting a global agreement on reducing emissions and various other climate change-related measures. I mean, the downside is that the path is so weak that we've pretty much, if we go down the path that's been outlined, we're pretty much guaranteed to have 2 degrees of warming or considerably more. So Yeah, so it's kind of like, well, we've got something of a framework, but the rules within the framework are just desperately weak. And because we've delayed taking action now and doing anything serious until 2020 under this framework, the next decade is going to be quite critical for reducing emissions, and so this doesn't do it.
So it looks like major carbon-emitting nations are resigned to the fact that we are going to have 2, 3, possibly 4 degrees warming. But what is the significance of that?
Well, it's about tipping points, really. The climate system, the way it seems to work when we look at the kind of fossil record of what happened with climate is that it kind of sits in a stable spot and has a little bit of variation around it, and then it'll suddenly move to a new stable spot, a new equilibrium point. And so we're in a really, we've had this equilibrium point we've been in for a while. It looks like what we're going to do by pushing it out over 2 degrees is we're going to flip it to a new equilibrium spot. And that means, obviously with a much warmer climate, you have much higher oceans. You have, much more intense weather systems, droughts, floods, all the rest of it. So the danger is, this is the path we're on now. This is what the agreement has decided to do, is to move the climate to a different system, a different equilibrium point, and that's not going to be good for us. It
does seem to be that humans require major disaster before any kind of action, and perhaps that's what's required.
Yeah, the thing about climate, the reason why we as a species are basically completely failing to deal with the issue is the time lags involved are really long. We're talking decades. It's our kids and our kids' kids that are going to bear the consequences of our inaction today. Though, some of us will live to see some pretty extraordinary things. And it requires global action. So not only has it got this huge time lag in it, which, we as humans find really difficult to act on, but also it requires everybody to hold hands. And everybody to do their bit. And of course, the New Zealand government epitomised the problem when they basically said, well, we don't want to do anything if anyone else won't do anything, and we don't really want to do anything anyway because we think it might be bad for us. And so you've got this problem of collective action. How do you get collective action, and collective action for a problem whose worst consequences won't appear for decades?
Yeah, really hard, because we're not very good at planning ahead. Well, especially with our election cycles, only every 3 years.
Yeah. It's just we're these crazy animals that have developed this consciousness, and somehow we have to find a way to use that consciousness, this advanced reasoning and ability to think that we have, and our science and all the rest of it, to actually act on what we know, and that's what we're really struggling with.
Good point, Russell. Lovely talking to you this morning. We'll talk to you next week for our final chat for 2011.
Okay, see you then, mate.
Co-leader of the Greens, Russel Norman. It's now 19...